Praise be to the almighty Dan Sickles. He lost his leg to preserve the Union and Gettysburg National Military Park. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this edition of Uncut History. Yeah, you weren't expecting me to start off like that, start off that sarcastic, did you? No, you didn't. All right, we got Books and Battlefield. He's already joined us in for the chat. Ken, thank you for joining in. I believe you are our newest member of the Garrison, if I'm not mistaken. And if that is the Ken, I believe that has joined the Garrison, and I'm correct. Thank you for joining the Garrison, fortifying this bastion of historical preservation. And we should have a few other people tuning in soon as well. I know it's a little unusual to be doing it on a Friday night. I know I try to strive if I'm going to go live, we do it Thursdays. That was my plan all week. I was like, okay, Thursday night, I think we're going to do a live stream on the 9th, and I think we'll do a live stream on the 23rd. You know, get two streams out. I got a lot to talk about. Life to me yesterday. There was a lot going on here at home. So by the time I was sit down and ready, it was like, yeah, we all good to go on Friday. Is that fine? Now, before we begin, I got a rant. So I don't use any fancy earbuds when I'm editing or lounging on the computer at night. I don't even know what the brand, well, they're Sony earbuds. I don't know what the actual code is for the model. You can get them in blue, you can get them in black and white. They're like $9.98 at Wally World. So usually I buy two at a time because after about 3 months, they do wear out. So about a month ago, my first pair wore out. Okay, it's okay. I buy a backup supply. I buy a second one. Well, that lasted all of a couple weeks because one night I accidentally pushed this earbud too tight and something must have frayed inside. And it's done. So I only got one earbud in that. Now I do have a really, really cheap generic brand of AirPods. I hate AirPods. I hate that I have to recharge these suckers. It's just such a nuisance. I rather just, be able to plug mine into whatever device I'm using, plug them in, no problem. But that's how they get you in the 21st century. That's how they get you. So I bought these cheapo pair of Dollar General. Man, are they so uncomfortable. They don't sit in my ear. So I was like, well, I need earbuds just in case I have audio playing so I can make sure it works. Well, every time I speak, they just slide out. So you know what? We're doing this. We're just going to put them away. I don't need them. I guess I'll just have to listen to myself speak for the next 2 hours. Yeah, I like having hearing protection for my own voice, but I guess I'm just going to hurt my own ears tonight with my ugly voice. So, yeah, tried that. That's my micro rant in starting off. How'd you guys like that? Is that a good cold opening? Skull candies. What are those? I'm assuming they're some type of wireless earbuds. Well, hopefully the internet will cooperate here shortly again. Hopefully you're hearing enough of me. As long as you hear my ugly voice, as long as you're hearing the information, that's what really matters. Like, let's be honest, my video quality for these live streams, that's subpar compared to other people. I run off of a little tiny built-in webcam on my laptop, which I use predominantly for editing videos, so, and writing scripts and things like that. I know it feels like it was a little more than a week. Feels like a couple weeks. It feels like it was a month ago. I think I told you when we were there, Books, that wasn't that. I mean, I've been running around crazy the past few weeks. So Gettysburg was just but one of several stops I have made in the past successive weeks. And again, this weekend, I will be out again. Now, fortunately, this weekend, I don't got to travel far from my neck of the woods, but I am going to try to go get another video filmed before April really swings into full view and, working regularly, working a couple different jobs. It's going to kind of cut into my filming time. So late March, I got out, early April, got to do as much as I could. And you'll be seeing those adventures be produced into various videos in the coming weeks. Hopefully that'll last us for a little while here on the channel. A lot of stuff is coming from Gettysburg. Yes, I appreciate Matt C for giving that shout out for my YouTube channel. I was not expecting that. We're going to talk a little about the Gettysburg Film Festival and all that I kind of got involved with. I I'm not going to claim I was like in the thick of it or anything, but I had a lot of cool interactions, and I was very fortunate to finally get to meet Matt Callery of Addressing Gettysburg in person. Got to tour the battlefield with himself, History of Waffles, and Mike Lentz actually was the tour guide really for that experience. So that was really cool. Just we didn't plan that. That was not planned. It's just it happened that I was at the Cops of the Trees filming. Waffles was with Matt filming, and then Mike was along for the ride. And all just kind of came together. We're all like, I guess we'll just float around the Cops of Trees for a little while and talk history. So, and I'm glad, I'm happy. I'm glad that Matt enjoyed our episode of Retracing History about the first Minnesota. And last night, Addressing Gettysburg had a wonderful Ask a Guide episode from Ralph Siegel, who, by the way, 8th grade field trip, Ralph Siegel, Battlefield License Guide, was my field trip's guide. I distinctly remember it was Ralph Siegel. So I have a fondness for whenever he's on Addressing Gettysburg. I love listening to him. And I was like paranoid the whole time. I'm listening to him talk all about the numbers, the disputed numbers of the first Minnesota. And I'm like, oh, did I get that right? Because I'm sorry, guys. What was that? 3 years ago, we did the first Minnesota episode. I'm like, did I do that right? So I literally at the end, I was like shuffling through the timeline of the episode while listening to the Addressing Gettysburg episode. I think I did decent enough. You can never be perfect, but I feel I was within the ballpark of what Mr. Siegel was getting at by the overinflation of the numbers. And you got to be very delicate when you start playing the numbers games, not just in any military history, but especially at Gettysburg battlefield. All right. Chat's starting to hop now. So I gotta keep up. I hear the door opening and closing. Yeah, as sometimes the cats will play with the door. It can be a mess. Oh, went on Trapped in History podcast the other day. It's life about my travels. Oh, I'll have to go check that out. You're putting away rotors. I may or may not need rotors. I think I should be. No, the rotors I should be fine on the car for now. I got an idiot light I got to deal with before inspection now. Oh, crap, 8 weeks, geez. I think you may have a little more than me. Yeah, I think you may have a little more of a backlog than me, believe it or not, books. Yep, I also got to join in on was it Thursday? Yeah, it was me, Books and Battlefields. We got a kind of a tour from Mike Lentz of New Jersey. Now, Mike was teaming up with you with Books and Battlefield to help you guys with a new video coming out from you about New Jersey at Gettysburg. But I kind of tagged along for the ride for that one as well. I was doing a lot of that during the weekend, so no real like collab videos, but a lot of just, hey, you guys are here. Do you mind if I listen in? I just want to learn more about the history. Sure. And then off we went to the races. Yeah, a lot of walking. Yeah, my one of my toes were a little screwed up by the time I got home Saturday. I will admit that. I'm still nursing it. All right, is there anything else? All right. I can keep reading chat all day, and please, I encourage you to tune in. I'm wondering where a certain Michael and a certain Fu Man are, especially because Michael's the one that kind of instigated one of our subjects tonight. Yeah, this is his project that he's thrown upon me. So, we're gonna start off with we're doing more of the presidential throwdown tonight. So if you're tuning in new and you don't know what I'm talking about, Michael Archangel, one of our regular viewers, he suggested to me about doing a series of videos where we're going to have the United States presidents in history duke it out, essentially, in some battle royale. And I'm going to let the chat vote on what their favorite president is, but like in a tournament style, like a March Madness tournament style. We're in April now. So we kind of missed the March Madness theme, but we're going to continue it nevertheless. So last time we had George Washington, we had Thomas Jefferson, we had John Quincy Adams, and we had Andrew Jackson advance to the second round. So that's who advanced through the first round matches. We got 4 more matchups tonight. 3 of them are 1v1s, and then we'll get to the 4th one in a little bit. It's a bit of a mess. So we're entering a period of time. We're going from 1840 all the way till about 18. I'm trying to think how far we're going. I think we're going all the way to 1880, if I'm not mistaken, tonight. This era of history is very tumultuous for the United States, obviously because of the American Civil War, but there's a lot else going on as well. And up to this point, up to 1840, the line of succession was largely clean. There were some not without controversies, mind you, but it largely everybody completed at least one term in office. The election of William Henry Harrison changed all that. Ninth president of the United States. He is the shortest tenured president because he died within a month in his first term. I really can't. How do I rank that? I mean, this isn't like a situation like later on when James Garfield, who's unfortunately assassinated. We have about a couple months worth of his presidency. He got into. He made some policy, so we have an idea what he was going to do. What do we do with 3 weeks? And most of that's confined to your deathbed. What do I do with that? So I made a rule. For the rest of the presidential throwdown, a president must complete one full term in office to have a 1v1 matchup. One full term at least. Those that do not have one full term, and I mean full. I know there's some that filled in, 3/4 of that term. I need day they went into office, day they went out of office. That makes sense. Really, I guess you could say is I'm looking for people who were elected into the office and stuck around for the full term. That is my rule for 1v1 matchups. But don't worry, we're not going to forget about all of our short tenured presidents, the unfortunate class, as I call them. You're going to get to vote on them, guys. It's just going to be in a kind of a free for all situation. Does that make sense? All right. With that out of the way, let's start our first round. Where'd it go? So we're continuing with our first round action. Remember, William Henry Harrison died within less than a month of his first term. 10th president was John Tyler. Tyler finished out Harrison's term. Then we got the election of James Polk in 1844. He would be a one-term president. He would take office in 1845, serve until 1849. James Polk is most known for the Mexican-American War, basically kicking off right when he went into office. Now, to be technical, to be fair, John Tyler had a lot to do with instigating that. His administration, they were the ones that were looking at the paperwork of annexing Texas as a state. Polk's the one that finished that, however, and Polk's the one that really ramped up sending federal forces to the United States-Mexican border and then deciding to invade Mexico in order to take all these lands that would become the southwestern United States today. A lot of that is Polk's ambitions. Polk got elected because he was promoting and he was like, I'm coming in for one term. That's it, guys. This is a one and done, so you don't have to worry about me hanging around and becoming unreliable, becoming annoying. I'm coming in, swift changes. His big goal was we are going to get the southwestern lands, what they call that, the Mexican that become the Mexican cessation later on. So, your modern day New Mexico, Arizona, California, that was his ambition, to bring that into the Union, to solidify that the United States of America would go from the Atlantic to the Pacific Ocean with no interruptions. And he also would have been very important in negotiating Oregon Territory into the admission of the Union as well. So Polk was probably I'd probably say is the most underappreciated. I don't want to say underappreciated. He's definitely far more deserving of being in the names of most influential presidents. We talk about presidents that really exercise the power of the executive office, like Andrew Jackson did, like Lincoln would later on, and then going into the 20th century, like Franklin Delano Roosevelt did, and going up into more recent times. Polk should be up there for how much he stretched the limits of the executive branch. You just don't hear his name because he was only there for one term. He came, he saw, and he conquered. I don't think there's much else that can be said to describe his term. And this does lead directly into the growing friction over the dispute of slavery we talk about, because now the United States has now acquired even more land, and now there's the question of what is this land going to become? Well, it's south of the Missouri Compromise line. Does that mean this is all just going to become slave states? Well, hey, now all the people supportive of slavery, they've got an a great advantage, numerical advantage now when future states are decided, which is to increase the size of the House of Representatives. So you see the dilemma that's happening here. So it was very controversial, the Mexican-American War, but Polk pushed it through. It was a decisive United States victory. And then, interesting enough, he dies just a few months after he leaves office. So he doesn't live long. So he could have very well been in the unfortunate free for all, but nope, he completed one full term as the 11th president. After that, probably the most famous man from Polk's war with Mexico would become president. That'd be Zachary Taylor. He'd be the 12th president of the United States. He didn't live long, got about a year in office and died. Then President Fillmore would fill his position. Eventually, though, we end up with the election of Franklin Pierce in 1852, takes office in 1853. He'll hold it until March of 1857. Also, one term, he's from New Hampshire. I was reading a lot about Pierce actually for today's stream. And by the way, the poll is already live for the Polk and Pierce battle. So if you already want to make your decision, go ahead now. We're definitely in an era now when you get into the later half of the 1840s and the 1850s. What's going on is you have the Democratic Party, which are trying to play the game of compromise. At least the most affluent members are trying to play middle of the road, vanilla compromise on this debate over slavery. Occasionally you have the Whig Party. Anytime the Whig Party, the Democratic Party's biggest rival, they get their nose in the presidential game. Both times it ends terribly. First time, William Henry Harrison was their candidate. Great, they won, and then he died. And then John Tyler basically kicked most of the Whigs out of power, and he basically defaulted as a Democrat. But none of the Democrats want to support him because Tyler had gone with the Whig Party. So Tyler was as much of a lame duck president as you can get. And then the Whigs again pushed another war hero in the form of Zachary Taylor. All right, we're back in office, and the Whigs, they had sentiments to free soilers. They had sentiments to, opposing the expansion of slavery. But again, they were very vanilla when they discussed it. So usually your Democratic Party had ties in cities, especially or in your southern states, where the Whigs, they gained power in isolated pockets in northern cities, as well as I'd say Midwestern farmers, North Midwestern farmers. But both of them were really vanilla when it came to handling the debate over slavery. So nobody was really happy with either party at this point. Pierce, he wins the election for the Democratic Party, and you'll just see a succession of one-term presidents come in and out from the Democratic Party. They're usually they have familiar ties in northern states, but their leanings are more to compromise and allowing the establishment of slavery to exist in existing states. They're just like, I just want to get to the end of my term. So that was kind of Franklin Pierce. He was in a trend of vanilla presidents, if I would say. That's just how they were. Nobody wanted to play the hot button game yet. And of course, that didn't end badly. Now, Pierce is probably most infamous, his administration. This was at the time when the Kansas-Nebraska Act came to light. And this ultimately was, again, dealing with Polk, dealing with the Mexican-American War, the ramifications of it. Okay, what are we going to do with all this land we just acquired? Well, we're going to allow at least the territories of Kansas and Nebraska. They'll get to decide if they'll allow slavery or not through popular sovereignty. And on paper, it's not a bad idea. Hey, let's just let the people who are going to settle there vote it out. But that's where they live. Now, this undermined certain other compromises before then, but we won't look at that. Unfortunately, the Kansas-Nebraska Act essentially was the opening, I guess you want to say, the opening of the floodgates for political violence, because everybody just decided to relocate to Kansas and Nebraska that felt very strongly over the debate of slavery, like a certain man named John Brown. And this is where you get the Bleeding Kansas from. So very controversial, the Kansas-Nebraska Act. It was designed to appease the settlement between the free and slave state. It was like, hey, you guys can decide it, power to the people. Well, the people decided to side it with firearms and sometimes swords. Interesting enough, though, Pierceville was also heavily involved in expanding U.S. trade power overseas. So it's during the Pierce administration that you actually see the Perry expedition to Japan happen. The United States and force a treaty with Japan so they can trade with them again, trade with them in that region. So there's something that not a lot of people talk about, Franklin Pierce, that happens during his administration. So decide, guys, on who you want to win in this round, Polk or Pierce. I'm really curious to see where this goes. Read about Polk during that war. He was very smart, but he kept to himself a lot. Learned, I believe, under Jackson and Jefferson, if I'm not mistaken. That sounds in the right ballpark. It's been a while since I've really read in detail about Polk. I really became fascinated by the Polk administration. Oddly enough, this may be the one of the few happy things I'll say about college. My time taking a college class. Yeah, I think you watched Chan a long time. You know, I'm not really enthusiastic of college education. And I don't think it's for everybody. I don't say it's bad. I'm definitely was not cut out for secondary education. That's just me personally. But I will say, we had a wonderful textbook about American history. I can't believe I'm saying that. I want to say, was it David Emery? She was the main author, or he was just the editor for these American history textbooks. They're so good. I want to get a copy for myself. And he spends a very lengthy chapter breaking down the Polk administration. The Polk administration is given special spotlight. A lot of the other ones are kind of skimmed over in chapters that have combined several presidencies. Polk is given his own chapter, and he pretty much pre-emphasize this is one of the most consequential presidential administrations you're going to read about. And it really made me recontextualize Polk's importance in American history, as well as when we talk about the road to the American Civil War. It was the book A Wicked War, just recently finished. Well, this year read and finished. All right, I'll have to put that on the reading list. Polk went, Woodage 8434 joins in with Polk wins this one because he actually did stuff. Pierce was just there. However, Ken's like, well, Pierce is from New Hampshire, so, you know, I got to vote for him. All right, guys, let me head over. I'm going to end the poll in YouTube's glitching out. Get your votes in, guys. We're almost done, so get it done. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Oh, okay. Well, that's, I wasn't expecting that result. We have a 50-50 split. So, nobody can decide on Polk and Pierce, huh? Yeah, this is an oof. Do I just disqualify them? Do they, like, cancel each other out? Do they both go to the next round? I can be bought. I can be bought. There's nothing more political than that. I can be bought. We're gonna put a pin in Polk and Pierce. I'll see if I can find a solution for the night is over. Maybe if we see more people join in. If we have more people join in, maybe we'll run a second vote. We may have to do a runoff election, guys, for this one. Oh boy. We could flip a coin for it. I actually like that idea. I don't even got I got quarters. Okay, we can do this. We're gonna do they both have pretty dang good hairstyles. I'm not gonna lie to you. I mean, I favor Polk, of course. I mean, Polk really got that. He got the mullet going. I think we're gonna go Books and Battlefields. I'd go Books and Battlefields. I think we're gonna flip a coin on this one. Oh my god, I never thought we were gonna get to this point. So here first, we are deciding who's advancing, Franklin Pierce or James Polk by a quarter. This quarter, by the way, is sponsored by Althea Gibson, trailblazing tennis champion. This is what's deciding the fate of Polk and Pierce. It's not even like a state one. I'm like, oh, I want to be really funny if this was Texas or something. Let me check. If we have a Texas one, I may have to use Texas. I got Missouri, so that would be appropriate. But I don't think I got Texas on the table. Nah, I got Virginia as well. Yeah, okay. For the randomness, for the sake of the randomness, this is part of the war. This is the part of the lore of Readout Productions. We're gonna decide who's the better president between Franklin Pierce and James Polk over a quarter that was created in honor of Althea Gibson of tennis fame. I have no idea who this is. All right, heads is gonna be Polk. Tails is gonna be Pierce. You're gonna watch the worst flip ever. That's no, we're not gonna do that. I can't even flip a quarter. Okay, here we go. It landed over here. It hit the head of my witness tree from Gettysburg paperweight. Wow, this went off the rails. It's heads. It is heads. Polk wins by a flip. Man, we should decide some of our elections like that. I think that'd be fair, to be honest. We have decided that James Polk defeats Franklin Pierce after a tie in a bout of toss and quarters. Heads landed. We called heads. James Polk advances. Congratulations, James Polk. You want to recount? You don't trust the randomness of my computer desk, of that quarter bouncing off of things. We should have an elected VP as a tiebreaker. We could have decided based off a VP. If it happens again, here's what we'll do. If this happens again, we will go to the VPs of the respective presidents, and you'll have to vote it based on the vice presidents. What do you think about that? And that's what we'll do. It'll be so obscure. All righty, so that was way more fun than I thought we were going to have. All right, we got a couple other things I want to talk about. So before we do our next round, let me figure out how I share screen. All right, we shared a screen. All right, this is how we go to the window. Yep, share the window. Oh, you know what? That's spoilers. I don't know how long we're going live tonight. Where's the screen? Oh, yeah. Maybe I need to remove this. Hello, show screen, show screen. You should be seeing a live stream of the Artemis 2 space capsule, which is on the way down. Hey, Andrew, thank you for joining in tonight. I'm happy you're able to pop in. I don't know where it is. It's missing. Maybe if I what's going on here? I have no idea what was going on. Okay, I guess we'll have to share by tab. I guess StreamYard is broken. Let's try that again, guys. We got an article I want to read to you. There's a couple articles tonight. I'm kind of breaking up the presidential throwdown. Did that share? Okay, that's shared. So it's shared by tabs, but not by window. So I have to go for every. This is the issue with StreamYards. The window sharing function is broken all the time. So I got to go by freaking tabs, which just makes it more. Anyways, it's nighttime. It is nighttime. There's still some sunlight here in Pennsylvania, Ken. Pardon, we have some technical difficulties. Feel free to go and grab some popcorn while holding your device. Yep. Nighttime. Yeah, the damn windows. Those damn windows. They never want to work. So here we are, back to where we were going. So this just happened at the start of April. Laurel Caverns, which is only about an hour's drive from where I'm located here in the Laurel Highlands. It is our only show cave, excluding if you count Bedford, which really isn't part of the Laurel Highlands. They got Coral Caverns, but it's on the east. It's immediately east of the Allegheny Mountains. Bedford and Cambria County to me are honorary Laurel Highlands. That's just me personally. Anyways, Laurel Caverns has been put in the trust of the state of Pennsylvania. So it is now going to be a state park. It's actually the 125th state park admitted to Pennsylvania. So I'm going to read this article from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette by Mary Ann Thomas, and then I'll give you my 2 cents on this event. If not for David Cale's love of science, Laurel Caverns could have easily been wiped out or exploited for the very rock, limestone, that was partly responsible for the cavern's celebrated formations. Cale recently donated Laurel Caverns in Farmington to become the 125th State Park and Pennsylvania's very first subterranean park. 3 generations of his family have owned or been involved with his geological wonderland for a century. Governor Shapiro, State Department Conservation and Natural Resources Secretary Adams Dunn, and other officials lauded Cale during a grand opening celebration on Monday. The donation preserves the caverns for future generations, a lifetime goal of Cale 80 of Uniontown. Your responsibility is not explicit for making money, but to preserve it and use it for the public in a way that doesn't destroy it. Cale had managed Laurel Caverns as a popular tourist destination, educational, and caving site for decades. He discovered and shoveled his way through sand and sometimes clay to add its 4 miles of passageways. His grandfather, Norman Cale, bought the site in 1926, so 100 years ago, the Cale family acquired the property. Although he later sold it, Cale bought it back and founded the Laurel Caverns Conservancy, which still operates tours of the site. As president of the Conservancy, he plans to continue leading tours as he has done since 1964, making him part of Laurel Caverns history. He met his wife, Lillian Gangware, when she and her 8th grade class toured Laurel Caverns. After they married in 1977, Cale designed and built what he believes is the first home in the country to be built using the metric system. Purchased above the visitor center, the Cale chalet offered an expansive view of the Laurel Highlands, but it was very isolated, he said. One year, when the mountain was snowed in, my poor wife was in that house for 3 to 4 hours, or 4 days. I guess hours ain't bad. Days is probably what I should read. He also thought that the home's appearance from Route 43 interrupted the mountain view of Chestnut Ridge. So he razed the house in 1997, but left a remnant of its facade that still is visible today. Other touches of the Cale family are present on the grounds, including the ashes of his grandfather, Norman Cale. The cave has been known since at least the 1700s. Native Americans used sites near the caves, previously known as Delaney's Cave. The site has attracted tourists by horse, train, and automobile. Cale has been involved in many facets of Laurel Caverns, from exploring to digging tunnels to persuading his grandfather to change the name. He first explored it alone when he was 6 or 7 years old. It was not religious, but I had a kind of communication with the cave. I thought I got to look after you and make sure that you are safe. Forced to deal with litter and damage left by unauthorized visitors, Cale and his grandfather knew it needed to be protected for future generations. They decided to start holding public tours. He was a freshman at Concord University in West Virginia when the tours began in July of 1964. He constructed its first sign for the caverns, mimicking one in Pinnacle Rock State Park in southern West Virginia. His grandfather, an accountant, went to spend no more I can't speak. Wanted to spend no more than $160 on the sign. For $10, wait, I got a bid for that. $10. Did he say $10?
$10, a lot of money.
Got to use that whenever I can. And Andrew's correct. This is located very close to Fort Necessity National Battlefield. I want to say it's like no more than 8 miles to the west of Fort Necessity. Do we have a blank screen? Do we still have a blank screen? Well, according to my feed, we got a screen, so I'm going to say we're good. Hopefully everything's been resolved over there. I have a Joe Pesci gif.
What the fuck is this piece of shit?
Hopefully there were no children watching at that time. I didn't prompt you for it. All right, you heading off to bed, Ken? I'm putting you to sleep. Hopefully, I'm not putting you to sleep. As far as I'm aware, we're streaming here, so Ken got me a little paranoid. Ignore Ken, he is new. He is new boy. We will ignore new boy. All right, back to the story. The story of Laurel Caverns. Cale chortles when telling the story about his grandfather's reluctant acceptance. I suppose it would do until we can get a good one. The sign stayed up for 4 years. I guess it was good enough. Around that same time, he was also a young splunker. In 1963, Cale said he found what is officially known as Cale's Pit by the West Virginia Geological Survey. He found actually a sinkhole on a West Virginia farm, which he believed was a cave. It was the dumbest moment of my life. At least he's honest. He brought 2 carloads of college friends to the farm and lowered them into the hole by a rope. I have a lousy sense of fear. After descending about 80 feet into the bottom, Cale found nothing but skeletons and turtle shells of the poor animals that fell into the pit. That is what it was, a natural well that went nowhere. He discovered an unusual geological formation, a dome pit, also known as a vertical cave. The local fire department was called to retrieve them from the hole. Oh, the farmer was mad as heck, and they pulled me up like a piece of meat on a string. I was humiliated because I told my friends I had found the big cave. But the blowback didn't last long. Cale forged alliances with some caving groups that would help him dig out more passages and rooms at Laurel Caverns. Throughout his life, Cale was inspired by his love of science and Laurel Caverns itself. One grandfather owned Laurel Caverns, while another served as a structural engineer on the design for nuclear reactors and submarines. We're going to talk about submarines in a bit, by the way. I spent a summer where I got to meet nuclear physicists. That was an entirely new world for me with math. I loved physics and became addicted to math. Well, you're completely the opposite of me, Mr. Cale. For Cale, Laurel Caverns served as a lab. He learned geology while digging in the caverns when he was about 15. He retired several years ago as a West Virginia University professor, teaching a range of courses, including philosophy and ethics. He earned a doctorate and master's degree in philosophy from Duquesne University, MBA from Wheeling Jesuit University, bachelor's degree in political science from California University of Pennsylvania. He has authored many books, including How to Create a Policy Manual for Your Life, The Kantian Element and the Copenhagen Interpretation of Quantum Mechanics, The Basis of Consequentialism, and The Old Man's Cave. I think the Kantian Element book, they actually tried to sell it. They were selling at one point at the gift shop. There was one of these science books from Cale. I know that it really had nothing to do with the cave, but they were still trying to promote it nevertheless. When walking in the caverns, he will say this passage did not exist. There was a stream coming out of here. He has moved the stream that runs through the site. He follows the joint lines in the rocks while digging new passages. There have been some interesting trials and errors. Decades ago, when Cale was following joint lines and digging to open new passages in his free time, he decided to buy a used fire truck. Blasting water through 2,000 feet of hose would quickly flush the sand from passage and other areas, he thought. After 20 minutes of blasting, one of Cale's staffers unexpectedly broke through an unknown part of the cave. Clad in a white shirt and tie, Cale jumped right in and crawled through the muck, finding a new passage with a lot of cave of it. To see a part of the world that a human being had never seen before is a great experience. If Cale had his way in more time, he'd still be digging through these caverns. If we could get all the sand out, we would have 20 miles of passages. With the state preserving the site, Cale's dream may come true someday. So yes, Cale family have had Laurel Caverns preserved for nearly a century on top of Chestnut Ridge here in western Pennsylvania. It has now been transferred over, the stewardship's been given over to the Pennsylvania DCNR, which is really just our state park system. You've probably heard me talk about before. Pennsylvania, at least, is interesting because we don't have just like a standard state park system. We have the DCNR, which focuses on environmental preservation. And then you have the PHMC, which is the Pennsylvania Historical Museum and Commission, and they focus on historical and heritage sites. I am a little critical of this because the idea was that if you broke it into smaller niche divisions, they would be better equipped to preserve the respective sites. I personally feel that the funding is disproportionately given to the DCNR over the PHMC. That's just from my visits to state parks and historical sites ran by the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. I'd be happy to prove wrong, but I can't tell you how many stories of how badly underfunded PHMC sites are in our state. The DCNR, I'm sure, have their own headaches. I'm not trying to say they don't. I'm just saying from a visitor's perspective, if it's a DCNR ran site, it tends to have better facilities than a PHMC site. That's just what I've noticed. When I visited Kinzu Bridge State Park, even though the main draw is the former engineering marvel of the Kinzu Viaduct, it's a DCNR site, and they have a fantastic education center there. It's one of the best in the state. Ohio POW, of course, is ran by the DCNR, which we call the Waterfall Capital of Pennsylvania. Again, not too far from Laurel Caverns, so that'll actually fit pretty nicely. They have a pretty decent education center, and they have a lot of staff on hand. So hopefully Laurel Caverns is going to get a steady stream of funding and manpower to interpret and protect the site for future generations. It's an awesome time. I've gone many times over the years from when I was really little. We've done an episode of one of the early episodes of Retracing History. We're on Laurel Caverns. So this is really exciting. I just hope, since now it's going to be government managed, what it's sounding like, and government and managing, that those words do not apply normally, as we're learning in our presidential throwdown. So I wish the best for Laurel Caverns State Park. I do have my worries and my skepticisms about sites ran by the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. That's what I'll say on that. All righty. Well, we're going to move over to our next round action. We got some next round action, but first I got to get the, got to go over and make your poll. In the meantime, yeah, see, I can't share. I got to share by tab, and this just sucks. Why do I got to share by tab? Why can't I? You have a window option. It'd be. As I get the next one set up, here we have actually the live stream, which they're saying it's going to be a little after 8 o'clock. A splashdown is supposed to occur for Artemis 2, which is, hopefully it's not goofing up like that. Artemis 2, which is the first manned mission to the moon since 1972. Now, they did not land on the moon. This was an orbit around it. So this was very similar to the Apollo 8 orbit around the moon, the famous one that Jim Lovell was a part of. That's where he gives the, reads from the Bible and everything. We got the lovely Earthrise photograph from 1968. And Apollo 13 also just orbited the moon for obvious reasons because they had mechanical problems. But the goal is, I think, Artemis 3, which will be the next mission after this. It'll be the official return on the moon itself, an official moon landing. That's what they're going for. But all that's going to hinge upon this re-entry being successful. It's been pretty hotly debated in the news. A lot of worries from news outlets about will the heat shield hold up or not. There were issues with the unmanned Artemis 1 mission. The capsule did re-enter successfully. However, the burn up on the heat shield was far more intense than they anticipated. So it led to the people that planned this mission out to readjust the angle of the re-entry that they were going to allow the man crew to conduct. So I think this is much more shallow than they were initially anticipating. So hopefully all goes well, and hopefully we'll get to see them splash down in the Pacific Ocean live for tonight is over. Now, in the meantime, I'm over here making my poll. You decide. I don't even know why I'm making a poll for this one. I'm going to be honest, but we got to be fair. Here we are. Look at that chat go. It's going a million miles per hour. Oh my God. It's going. Oh my God. You could probably power a town with how fast that's moving. Get the electricity going off if that was spinning. All righty. All right. I think we got that covered. All righty, guys. Let me remove that. Let me get back on the TV. There we are. I'm back on. And let us go over to the next round. Oh, poor James Buchanan. You are You get no rest for the weary. You get the suckiest assignments, even in our little presidential throwdown. Do I really even need to do an introduction for this one? So after Franklin Pierce, the Democratic Party continued with their milquetoast candidates. Yeah, I'm just going to be pretty blunt on it. They're looking for Northern men with Southern sympathies that would compromise on the debate of slavery. Not saying that they would expand it, but they're also not going to show signs they're going to stop it, and would not use the federal government to interfere with the mess that is fast becoming bleeding Kansas. So James Buchanan's elected. Many said when he's elected in 1856, he was the most qualified man to be president of the United States. I mean, he had done just about everything. He had been in the politics in the state of Pennsylvania. He had served in the House of Representatives. He had served in the Senate. He was Secretary of State. At one point, he was the minister to the United Kingdom. I think he was minister to Russia as well before that. And everybody's like, he's perfect for the job. He's elected president of the United States, and it all goes to hell in a handbasket. Buchanan was known to be a great compromiser when he was in the court of law. That did not equate well to the president of the United States, especially in the late 1850s. And I'm going to tell you, in terms of personalities, I find him to be one of the dullest people to be president. He has a fascinating portfolio, don't get me wrong. But actually, if you were in the room with this man, I think what paint drying would have been more interesting. So you don't really have a charismatic leader, somebody that's going to be easy to engage with the masses, let alone people just in Washington, D.C. So all this kind of coupled to a bad situation. The biggest crisis for Buchanan was, well, when he first gets into office, there's the Dred Scott case is going on in the court, and it's found out later, wasn't known publicly at the time, but it's later found out Buchanan actually pressured certain justices to vote against Dred Scott, a vote against him, because Buchanan wanted to show that the federal government was not going to make a decision on slavery. He was not going to make it out. So he's just going to stay with the status quo, which is, hey, slavery is legal in the states. It is a state matter. The federal government cannot decide it. What the Dred Scott case ended up doing, though, was declare, hey, the federal government's not going to do anything to stop the expansion of slavery. And by the way, that Fugitive Slave Act has been around all these years. Yep, we're not going to stop anybody from going up into northern states. And, we're like, hey, it's actually the federal law. If there's a fugitive slave hiding out, they got to come back to the respective owners. So we're actually going to assist people in capturing people and taking them back into servitude. This infuriated people in northern states like Pennsylvania, turned that against Buchanan. Meanwhile, the southern states, they were like, oh, yeah, but he won't go. He ain't hard enough. He ain't supportive enough of us. He's from a northern state. We can't trust him. Nobody would trust Buchanan, and the situation just unraveled. And then this culminates, we have the John Brown raid on Harper's Ferry in 1859. That was during the Buchanan administration. That didn't help quell matters. That only expedited the fear of southern states that, well, even though Buchanan won't really do much, what's going to stop another president getting into office that may actually want to abolish slavery? What's going to stop them from using federal law to take away take away slavery? Nobody knew what was going on. Then there's all sorts of other matters. They're thinking of the nullification crisis, going back to the Jackson administration and how he handled it. So they're like, oh God, what would happen if, we get somebody in power who's like Jackson and he's going to threaten federal forces if we dare try to leave? This is just, Buchanan just really was not the personality to try to quell rising paranoia, rising distrust amongst the states. So in some ways, people claim James Buchanan's administration is what caused the American Civil War. I would argue the causes go way back, way further. Buchanan was just the unfortunate man at the very end of the fuse burning. And of course, his success, the next president after him would be Abraham Lincoln. He is the first Republican nominee successfully elected as president of the United States. This is going to send Southern Democrats into a frenzy leading to secession. And actually, secession begins in the Buchanan administration. The Buchanan administration does not stop the secession. They do not want to repeat the nullification crisis. So they're like, nope. We know when Jackson threatened to send federal forces into South Carolina, that only caused more tensions. We're going to do nothing. So that's the Buchanan administration. We all know what the Lincoln administration is going to do. It's going to call for 75,000 volunteers to stop the southern states from seceding, force them back into the Union. You cannot just leave because you don't agree with who was elected president. And then the American Civil War kicks off in earnest. Yep, he didn't do it. He didn't cause a civil war. He didn't do anything to even attempt to stop it, however. Yeah, Buchanan really, I mean, Buchanan's argument was there was nothing he could do at this point. The country wanted its civil war and kind of like, but fine, they're going to get what they asked for. But he did not really make many efforts to try to show like, hey, I don't want secession to happen. He was pretty quiet on the matter. Like, I can't do anything to stop it. Have fun, Lincoln. And by the way, Buchanan never sought re-election. He was a one-term guy. He was kind of like James Polk. So he was kind of harkening back to the Polk administration. Like, hey, I'm be honest, I'm just here for one term just to get the job done. And that's kind of why he had no real interest in trying to stop the crisis of secession that was brewing. I'm sure you guys are voting right now. I have a pretty good idea where this is going. Now, you may be wondering, well, Spencer, didn't Lincoln get killed very early on in his second term? You're correct, but he finished one full term, which is why he's allowed to have a one-on-one matchup. So, yeah, I'm making up readout rules at this point. So, I think we could be here all day saying all the things that Lincoln did. Lincoln really is going to redefine the presidential, the role of the president. It really shows you the power one person can wield in that position, which is quite frightening. How far you can bend the limits of, you can bend the powers in the U.S. Constitution. Yes, I know he's at a time of war, but also it's like Lincoln set a lot of precedents that are it's one of them sad things where I feel if Lincoln had lived through his second term, I don't think we would think as highly of him as we do historically. Because a lot of what he did were wartime measures. A lot of that, I think, would have come back to bite him in a second term. That's just my opinion. I'm not saying it was a good or bad decision. He had to do what he had to do because he was in a time of war. But when you set a lot of these precedents, it can lead to some dangerous results. So Lincoln wasn't around to see, we weren't around to see a peacetime Lincoln, only a wartime Lincoln. And that's what we have to base things off of. But I think we can't dispute that Lincoln, unlike Buchanan, was an great orator, great at public speaking. He was great at rallying people around supporting the federal government. Lincoln really did recontextualize the United States as being operated as a single nation, we are one people. I don't think any president before this did such I'd argue not since George Washington did a president do such a tremendous job in making everybody feel and as an American and not as somebody from a state in a union. So I'm gonna let you guys finish that up. And just a heads up, it looks like that the Artemis 2 is beginning re-entry as we finish up our votes. So get your votes in. I don't know why I'm hesitating. They will end in 3, 2, 1. Waiting a bit for a delay. Here we go. Unsurprisingly, President Lincoln has won by a landslide. Congratulations, Lincoln. You had quite possibly the single easiest contest in his entire Throwdown. I don't know. I didn't see that coming. Nah, I didn't see that coming. That'd be pretty funny, though. If you guys voted Buchanan over Lincoln, I would question all of our sanities. By the way, we will actually have an episode of Retracing History devoted to James Buchanan. It's going to be coming out in the near future, in the next couple weeks. It was one of the episodes I filmed while I was on my trip out to Gettysburg and back. We stopped at the birthplace of James Buchanan near Mercersburg, Pennsylvania. And there's more to it than just the birthplace. Polk, yeah, Polk was far superior of a president than Buchanan. If we were going to have that contest, I think Buchanan and the Democratic Party are really trying to make him like a new, they were kind of taking bits of the Pierce administration and bits of the Polk administration and smashed them together. I forgot to mention Pierce was a veteran of the Mexican-American War as well. So Zachary Taylor wasn't the only, significant figure from the Mexican-American War to achieve office because of that conflict. Yeah, I know Ulysses Grant also becomes president, but let's be honest, Grant got elected not because of his Mexican War career. It was the Civil War stuff. But Franklin Pierce, he was very briefly a brigadier general in the United States Army during the Mexican-American War. I could be pot again. But the sad thing is about William Henry Harrison, and I'm very much a student of William Henry Harrison, I would at least say. I always am interested in his stuff. We'll never know how good of a president he would have been because unlike other presidents that have short terms, he's gone in less than 30 days. He's gone in 30 days. Yeah, there's not a lot to go off of. And I'll be honest, Harrison kind of was propped up by the Whig party, and the Whig were kind of trying to replicate what the Jacksonians had done way back in the day. And it worked. They repeated the formula that got Jackson into office. But I think Harrison would have been a much more, I think by that point, because he was the oldest, at that time, he was the oldest man elected president of the United States. I think he had a much, I don't know if he would have been as, I don't know if he would have been as fanatical in power as Jackson was. That's just me personally. If you ask most people in American political science class books, all presidents are better than James Buchanan. I'm just going to say that. All righty. Hold on. We got it really cool. Got it. Yeah. Add to the stage. I hate you, StreamYards. Just so you guys see what's going on with Artemis 2. It does look like it went for re-entry. It's currently free falling at God knows how fast, going toward the Pacific Ocean. It's always interesting to me how, growing up, I grew up, in the 2000s. Oh, parachute's been deployed. There we go. Starting out, we were doing stuff. I'd read all about the Apollo program, using rockets, taking capsules into orbit. And then, then it would peter out in the history books and it would go into the space shuttle and they were championing on, the space shuttle. It's the next big thing. And then it turned out, the space shuttle wasn't all as great as they had cracked up to be. All the propaganda had cracked it up to be. And then we went back to, rockets and capsules. Yep. That's still the best ways for space travel, especially if we want to go deeper into space. So it's really interesting. We've come full circle. This is new. This is an exciting moment in history, but a lot of technology is very reminiscent of what we were doing a half century ago. So there's like almost a half century now of space travel history, at least for the United States of America, where we said, we're going to try something else, the space plane. And it didn't work. So we were like, okay, back to formula. So it's crazy to think what we may have been able to do if we hadn't gone so into the space shuttle program. And there's cool things that we learned from the space shuttle program. It's so fascinating to think we've gone all the way back to space capsules, having to re-enter them, land them in the Pacific Ocean. We really flew back to the 1960s, actually. We really did miss our chance. We did, books. We could have had apes. I could have had like a model of the Statue of Liberty back here. I guess we could have used Pomni as the Statue of Liberty. And who's going to be Charlton Heston? That's the question. I've been really it's been really encouraging being on X and Hate Book. A lot of people posting space exploration history. Just post stuff like a lot of people just discovered there's more to the Apollo program after Apollo 11. So a lot of people just seem genuinely enthusiastic about space exploration again, and they're also bringing up past experiences. I love the nod that they were saying at the Artemis 2 crew. They took with them what would have been the flag plant on the moon for Apollo 18. So they actually, since it was never ended up being used, they end up putting it on the Artemis 2 capsule to take it up into deep space, take it out into space, fly it around the moon at the very least. So they say, the flag actually got to fly around the moon. Oh, we could have dressed Lincoln up as an ape. Oh, I see what you're saying. You can say they did infrared, and you could just see how apparently freaking hot the capsule must be from reentry. I know they were saying that they had a warship out there. Was at least the NASA, like, I guess you want to say press crew filming all this? They're on the John P. Murpha. I don't know what class of warship that is. And I know who it's named after, Congressman John P. Murpha, who's from Johnstown, Pennsylvania area. He's from my neck of the woods. So it's pretty interesting. I got a local tie into this whole event out here. That I've seen, probably my favorite thing I've been seeing from this is like the historical enthusiasts. They're joking about like, we've had this big kerfuffle about all the space shuttles going into different museums, the Smithsonian wanting the Discovery Space Shuttle. Can Johnson Space Center have something finally, since this is the headquarters of all of this? They're like, Johnson better not let go of Artemis 2 space capsule. This is going to be their big exhibit item now. All right, splashdown's been made in the Pacific Ocean. Of course, we always have the obligatory amaze in the chat. That's the past few weeks, like, obligatory space related posts. Yeah, we're gonna reference the rock creature in Project Hail Mary. Alrighty, so that was pretty cool to see. Not gonna lie, I'm very happy. It kind of timed out pretty good in the stream. We had the chance. Well, the Smithsonian, the joke, I guess, on X was, it's like the Smithsonian gets everything, all the big, like, first this, first that, and they always find a way to get their hands on it, like the Discovery Space Shuttle. So they're like, how about this time Johnson Space Center holds on to the Artemis 2 space capsule? This is going to be part of their exhibit. We'll see. I sense the Smithsonian's going to try to get this capsule. Not going to lie. Oh, it'll be a number of years before they put this on exhibit. It'll be a long time. Alrighty. Well, I just want to tune in, show that, so you guys can watch that live during our own live stream. Don't want you guys to miss out on that. So we are going to continue on. We got our, I can see it now. Flat Earthers still won't be convinced. They'll be convinced of nothing, books. It won't matter. It doesn't matter what you tell them. They will insist the moon landing's fake. The Earth is flat. 9/11 did not happen. It just, there are certain things we just don't argue with people on. There's just times you must tell people to put the fries into the bag, and that's all the more you can say. Alrighty, well, I gotta remove this. Stop the screen. Let us get ready for the final round of the presidential throwdown. All right, you decide. Gotta write this down. This is very high tech, as you can see, guys. Okay, this is the last solo round, I should say, of the presidential throwdown. So here we go. No cheating. You got to wait until I get the thing out. My coworker said there was a guy counting the amount of times the camera angles changed during liftoff, and the number he counted were the amount of times NASA edited the footage. That was the argument. I mean, they have multiple cameras on the same thing. Like, I guess they're probably changing the angles because, you know, everybody claims they have ADHD nowadays. So they're probably going like, so they'll focus on the thing going off. For all wherever you've seen the joke of somebody posted somewhere, it's like, God, I must be the NASA camera guy. He must have been sleeping on a job where it's like this guy half sleeping and like the camera doesn't start rising until we get the flames coming out of the SLS. Yeah, we already know where it's going, but first we gotta give him a chance. It's Ulysses S. Grant versus Rutherford B. Hayes. Yes, I'm skipping over Andrew Johnson again because Johnson was not elected president. He was filling out Lincoln's second term. And I'm going to be quite honest with you guys. I don't think you guys are going to really vote for Johnson anyway. So we'll get to that in a moment. So Ulysses Grant, why has he become president? Well, after Lincoln was unfortunately assassinated, Andrew Johnson took power. Andrew Johnson was brought on the Republican ticket. He wasn't a Republican, really. He would have been a Southern Democrat if we were before the war. And really, he was brought on to appease Democrats in the North so they would re-elect Lincoln in 1864, showing unity amongst the country. You know, we have a Northern guy, we got a Southern guy, which really ain't a Southern guy. He's from Tennessee, if you want to count that Southern. Yeah, then, you know, one about something. He's from Kentucky. Lincoln's from Kentucky, so, you know. So Johnson, he assumes power. He very much tries to not use. He very much reverts to the old school states' rights advocate. He argues that, you know, the federal government should not be involved in the southern states anymore. He's pretty weak to respond to reconstruction efforts in the southern states. He's going to provide amnesty to a lot of Confederate officers. You're not really going to see any major trials or anything like that. For at the end of the day, these guys who seceded from the Union would technically be traitors of the United States of America as they fought against the United States. They fought against us and all that, you know, they were traitors legally. Now we can debate if it was right or wrong for Johnson, and future presidents did the same thing, provide a lot of amnesty for these guys and brought them back in power, but it upset a lot of your very radical end of the Republican Party at this point. And Johnson really wasn't in a rush to push in into federal law, what would become the 14th Amendment. He really wasn't in a rush to do things like that yet. So he fell out of favor with a lot of Republicans. He fell out of favor even with some Democrats. The Republican Party wanted to readjust. They want to get back onto what their political platform was back at the start of the American Civil War. And what's the best case situation? Well, you make Ulysses S. Grant, the commander of all Union forces during the Civil War, your nominee. And yeah, Grant was going to get elected. He was one of them. He's the most famous guy in the United States at this point. Yeah, the populism was kicking in as well. And Grant would serve for 2 terms, 1869 to 1877, and a lot happens. Grant is going to increase federal intervention in Reconstruction efforts, providing aid to the southern states. Also, though, trying to mitigate racial unrest, because you're going to have the rise of the Ku Klux Klan in the southern states around this time. They're going to be attacking not just African Americans, they're going to be assaulting anybody affiliated really with radical Republican policies. So he is very much involved with using federal power to keep the peace in southern states, which both has a good and bad thing. Yeah, I see it now. I don't even know how that ended up there. I know how that ended up there, actually, because that was the template for Van Buren. So that must have, I don't know how that ended up there. So 1877 to 1880. Sorry about that, guys. Really sorry about that. It happens. I think we all know that he came after, look, 18 president, 19 president. Hayes came after Grant. Look, I will have a severe talking with Editor Chan as to why she did not catch that. Yeah, she should have been able, she should have noticed. She should have known that I was in a rush to get to work this morning. She should have known to get those years right, especially you just got to go 4 more off a Grant. 10 points lost to Gryffindor. Well, we're making Harry Potter references now. So now Grant was pretty popular his first term, but by his second term, a lot was coming back to bite him. And I will say this, you hear a lot about all sorts of scandals and financial embezzlements that were going on with the Grant administration. For the large part, Grant himself seems to have either, if he was completely innocent, he was very ignorant to what was happening. Grant has a pretty good history of not being good at his financials. Just going to say that. That's before his presidency and after his presidency. So it makes sense that I think poor Grant was a little too trusting of a lot of people, especially when he got into political power. You just was like, I'm not a politician. I'm a military man. We'll explain to you, what you need to do and not need to do. We just need your raw leadership skills to exercise some of these powers. And that was good. And that was bad at the same time. So, and one of the big things he's going to do, his administration greatly advocate for trying to reinstate gold as the standard for U.S. currency. At this time, there was a lot of greenback currency, a lot of paper currency had been printed out to fund the American Civil War, to fund the war effort. And well, now they got to try to put some backing to all that fiat. There was a debate over gold and silver. Grant favored gold. The problem with that was the United States did not have enough gold in its reserves at that time. And that led to one of the worst financial depressions in U.S. history, the Long Depression, the Panic of 1873, which plagued the Grant administration for its second term. And that partly is why Grant did not seek a third term. Remember, you could run for a third term theoretically at this time, but he chose not to. And likely he wasn't going to anyways. I would presume Grant greatly respected the 2-term standard as set forward by Washington. So I don't think he would have done it anyways. Instead, the Republican Party will look for a similar war hero, somebody else from the Union, and that would be Rutherford B. Hayes. Hayes would be elected the 9th president. So still, Republican Party very much in power, very much are the supporters. Right now, the Democratic Party, they are they're really struggling to get back into the executive branch because, well, they're this party tied with the American Civil War, causing it. So they don't want to be involved. People at the end of the day, they don't want to put a Democrat in charge at this point. Republicans are pretty favored. Now, the Democrats will fight to get control over portions of Congress again and will be successful. But in terms of actually the executive branch, that's not going to come around for a little longer. Hayes will be a 1-term president. Hayes definitely had great leadership skills. I don't think he was on the level of Grant, but he infamously, he has the narrowest margin of any electoral votes. Like it went down to the wire in Congress, and it basically came down to 185 votes over 184 votes. It was as close to getting a coin toss at that point, seeing who was going to be elected president. It was very nail biting. He inherited the problems of the Long Depression, and this would boil over into the railroad strike of 1877, which happens very early on in his administration. That's one of the worst civil uprisings outside of the American Civil War. People were just not being paid. People were losing their jobs. It was just terrible working conditions, all sorts of stuff. Came the couple mass strike of railroad workers across the country, and it was violent. I don't think people realize how violent. Everybody hears about the Homestead strike and the steel mill strike in 1892 outside of Pittsburgh, and that was violent in its own self. But the difference was that was an isolated incident. It was contained to the Homestead Steel Works, where the railroad strike, there's fighting in Pittsburgh, fighting in Hagerstown, there's fighting in Martinsburg, there's fighting out in Chicago, all over major rail hubs. There was massive violence. The worst of it, though, was in Pittsburgh. I think about 20 people were killed just in fighting between rioters and the Pennsylvania National Guard in Pittsburgh alone. It was a mess. And Hayes also, at this point, Hayes was a little milder on Reconstruction and what Grant was. He ends up actually pulling out federal forces, which There's a lot of backdoor deals. Kind of got to be president. Kind of part of the deal was you get president. Federal troops, they're going out of the southern states. We are done with Reconstruction. So there's some shadiness as to what ultimately tipped the balance of power in his favor to get into office. But he was very much an advocate, too, for the preservation of natural lands. He's one of the first presidents to go out west and explore the Rocky Mountains. So he's a forerunner for advocating for land preservation. So there, Hayes tried his best. He was kind of like a unofficial third term for Grant, where he was just kind of finishing up loose ends of the Grant administration. And he was popular enough that although he did not want to seek a second term, it did allow the Republicans to still have the advantage going into the it was the 18. I always sorry guys, I'm gonna get my numbers confused tonight. I greatly apologize. I should be better than this. I should be better with my dates. Going into the 1880 election, Republicans will still have favor, which would lead to the election of James Garfield. But that's enough rambling about Grant and Hayes. Let's see where you guys lie. We're going to end the poll in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Pause for the delay. Here we go. No surprise, Grant is advancing to the next round. All righty. Now there is one more round. There is one more round we're going to have tonight. It's going to be a little interesting because I can't do it with an actual poll because there's too many options. So it's going to have to come down to writing in the chat. But before we do that, I do have one more story I want to read. Oh, stuff around. Washington had multiple uprisings as well. You're talking about all the mutinies that happened, or I should say near mutinies that happened during the American Revolution. And then, of course, you have the Whiskey Rebellion in 1794. Oh, God, Do I blame the Sam Adams? That's a good scapegoat to Sam Adams about why I'm getting my years wrong tonight. How's everybody doing? I believe Grant was considering it by 1880. He was not when he left office, though. He didn't run for like a third consecutive term. He was like, I got to get out of here. Everything, the seat is too hot because of all the scandals that are happening in his administration. I think he was happy to be over. So I think there were people trying to convince him to come back. I believe he did try to make an effort for it, but ultimately it was more, he's like, if you want me, fine. I'm not really going to make much effort to try to get elected, though. And obviously you saw how it happened. My thing about death by lightning, I have opinions. We'll save that for the next presidential throwdown, though, because we're really not talking about Garfield tonight. Alrighty. So I do have something else I want to read. Another story, because I wasn't thinking about this until I sat down tonight. Today is the anniversary of the first nuclear submarine to be lost by the United States Navy, the USS Fresher, which went down on this day in 1963. And I do have an article of note I decided we would read. This comes from the U.S. Naval Institute, comes from their Naval History magazine. This article was written by Norman Polmar. This is titled, What Killed the Fresher? So we're going to go into seeing what actually led to the destruction of this submarine. The USS Fresher, which sank 60 years ago this April, was the world's first nuclear-powered submarine to be lost at sea. Amid the public shock over the tragedy, the U.S. Navy grappled for an answer as to what went wrong. Even today, rival theories seek to explain the mystery. The Fresher got underway on her initial sea trials from the Portsmouth Naval Shipyard in Maine in April of 1961. She was the first of a new class of nuclear-powered submarines combining the attributes of an attack submarine and a specialized hunter-killer craft. The submarine had a cigar-shaped hull that was derived from the research submarine Albacore for efficient underwater performance. And I believe the Albacore is actually still around today because it was like a small nuclear submarine. It really was just to test the physics of this new cigar-shaped body. So I think the Albacore, if I'm not mistaken, is a museum ship today you can visit. In her bow was the massive BQQ-2 sonar, heralded as the most advanced sonar ever fitted to a submarine, being created with unprecedented passive detection ranges. The dome was 15 feet in diameter, mounted 1,241 transducers. The Fresher's 4 torpedo tubes were aft of the sonar, 2 on each side, angled out at 10 degrees from the center line. They could fire the latest anti-ship and anti-submarine torpedoes. Later, she was fitted to fire the ASROC anti-submarine rocket through these tubes. ASROC was a combination rocket and torpedo, launched like a conventional torpedo, which would strike to the surface, leave the water on a ballistic trajectory, and plunge back into the water several miles from the Fresher. When the Subrock's nuclear warhead detonated, okay, I can't see my periods. It's fine. It's fine. The submarine's S5W We're struggling tonight, guys. I can't do big words. The submarine's S5W reactor plant would give her unlimited range. Her pressure hull, constructed of HY80 steel, would enable her to dive to some 1,300 feet, unprecedented for a U.S. submarine. Her initial sea trials with Vice Admiral Hyman G. Rickover. I gotta shout him out now. Look. I came prepared tonight, guys. Look, I got my Rickover commissioning glass. Yeah, for the new submarine named after Mr. Rickover. We got to get a humble collector on for a special edition of Uncut History, or just sit down and talk with him. He loves Mr. Rickover. He is one of his biggest admirers. Just like how I am one of the biggest advocates for Dan the Man Sickles. Take that as you will. Take that as what you will. All right, back to the reading of the thing of the doohickey that we do here on Readout Productions. If I can get back to the title. Her initial sea trials with Rickover, head of the Navy's nuclear propulsion program, on board were successful, although there were some issues with instrumentation. The Fresher was placed in commission at the Portsmouth, shipyard on August 3rd, 1961, with Commander Dean L. Axon in command. At her commissioning ceremonies, Vice Admiral Harold T. Deuterman, the principal speaker, declared, "Fresher is not just another ship. Fresher is totally different." Less than 2 years later, the Fresher lay shattered on the ocean floor with the loss of all 129 men on board. Following her commissioning, the Fresher continued a lengthy series of trials and tests, as well as exercises off the Atlantic coast, sailing as far south as Puerto Rico. While in port in San Juan, the crew encountered problems with her diesel generator and then had difficulty in restarting her nuclear reactor. Shock tests followed, with the Fresher subjected to a greater intentional pounding than any other submarine in U.S. Navy history. She stood up remarkably well, with Commander Axon stating there was no question that the Fresher suffered damage, but it was all relatively minor. The damage we sustained did not impair the ship's ability to operate, and much of it, such as the damage to vital sonar tubes, we could repair ourselves with our stores of spare parts. Most tests and trials followed. In mid-July of 1962, the Fresher returned to the Portsmouth yard. There she embarked the crew's wives, parents, and children for a happy cruise. Then the submarine was back in the shipyard for major maintenance work. Yard periods always are trying for a ship's crew. Axon said relations between Fresher and Portsmouth were always extraordinarily good, at least in my experience. But he did add, if I can bring the arrow down, "It is true that we felt that it should have been more efficient, should have done better work at times, and move more quickly, and they should have done a better job of cleaning up after themselves. I was told by others that relations did deteriorate towards the end of the post-shakedown availability. While the Fresher was in the shipyard, Commander Axine received orders to take command of a new construction Polaris ballistic missile submarine, the USS John C. Calhoun. Wow. Wow, that really did come full circle. We didn't talk about Calhoun tonight, but he was definitely influential in all the crazy stuff we were talking about earlier. He protested the orders, wanting to see the yard work completed. His request was denied. Axine's relief in January of 1963 was Lieutenant Commander John Wesley Harvey, age 36. Wes Harvey had studied for a year on a scholarship at the University of Pennsylvania before entering the U.S. Naval Academy. After graduation, he served in an aircraft carrier and then in a diesel-electric submarine. He applied for nuclear power training, after which he reported on board the pioneering nuclear submarine Nautilus as reactor controls officer. He was on board when the Nautilus became the very first ship in history to reach the North Pole. Did not know about that. Well, I knew about Nautilus was the first to reach the North Pole. I didn't know that the commander of the Fresher was on that legendary journey. Harvey had come into the limelight in 1958 when television producers were seeking personable young heroes for quiz shows. Ah, yes. This is the one that, if you ever watched The Right Stuff, and they have John Glenn played by Ed Harris, he's on some, quiz show. This is what they're referring to. John Glenn was a contestant in his pre-astronaut days when he had just set a new transcontinental airspeed record. Harvey, then a lieutenant, just back from the Nautilus's epic cruise, was asked to try out for the NBC game show Concentration. He managed to solve the robust puzzle ahead of his competitors often enough to win a car. A set of electric trains? Ooh, that's the important part. He won a set of toy trains. I mean, a man could not be more happier with his model train collection, guys. A motion picture projector, 2 tickets to the coveted Broadway show My Fair Lady. I could just sell those. A Ming stool, a Swedish-made motorbike. Oh, God, that one must have been fun. An electric can opener. There's always an electric can openers on these shows. And a mud bath. Oh, okay. Most were welcomed by Harvey's wife, Irene, and their 2 sons. Harvey Starr was on the rise. After serving as chief engineer for a land-based submarine reactor at Windsor, Connecticut, he became engineer officer of the hunter-killer submarine Tullibee. In May of 1961, as a lieutenant commander, he became executive officer of the Sea Dragon, which is just a base name to have for any submarine. That submarine undertook innovative under-ice Arctic operations. Thus, he came to the Fresher well-trained and with considerable experience. Slowly, the Fresher began to look like a fighting ship again as her yard period at Portsmouth neared an end. Within the submarine, open panels were closed, piping was connected and tested, dials and pointers checked, and the massive trash and debris that had accumulated during the extensive work removed. The submarine underwent a fast cruise, while moored to a pier she was sealed and all equipment that could be tested. Even the Fresher's propeller was tested while cables held the submarine fast to the pier. More tests were conducted, as well as emergency drills. At last, navigation instructions, food, ashtrays, some personal belongings, mattresses, bedding were brought aboard as the submarine was prepared for post-overhaul sea trials. April 9th, 1963, the Fresher engineers began the 4-hour countdown required for starting up the submarine reactor plant. At 7:30, the engine room reported at full power. Lines were cast off and the Fresher was underway. On board were 129 men, 12 officers, and 96 enlisted men of the submarine's crew. A submarine force staff officer, 3 officers and 12 civilian employees of the Portsmouth Yard, a specialist from the Naval Ordnance Laboratory, and 3 civilian factory representatives were also on board. 96, 6. Okay, that's the 129. They're all those included. The 129 is the one you want to know about. 4 Fresher crew members had remained ashore for various reasons. The submarine steamed south from the yard and into the open sea of Ordianus Point. At 9:49 east of Boston, she rendezvoused with the submarine rescue ship USS Skylark, which would accompany the submarine on her trials. The Skylark carried divers and specialized equipment to enable her to moor over a stricken submarine and rescue personnel with her cable-lowered rescue chamber. Developed in the 1920s, the rescue chamber had been used only once, in 1939, to rescue 33 men from the stricken submarine USS Squalus. Another 26 crew lost their lives in that tragedy. The Squalus had sunk in 240 feet of water. The rescue chamber had a rated depth of 850 feet. Although the Skylark was to accompany the Fresher, the rescue ship's commanding officer had no information as to the capabilities of the submarine, such as depth and speed. An underwater telephone designated UQC was the means of communication in a submerged submarine. The Fresher made a shallow dive to test equipment and communicated with the Skylark via the UQC. Back on the surface on the afternoon of April 9th, Commander Harvey directed the Skylark to rendezvous with the submarine some 200 miles east of Cape Cod for the Fresher's deep water test. At about 1500 hours, the Fresher again slipped beneath the waves and sped toward deeper water. At 6:35 on April 10th, the Fresher came up to periscope depth some 10 miles from the Skylark. Just over 1 hour later, Harvey advised the Skylark that he was taking the Fresher to test depth, her maximum operating depth, generally reported as 1,300 feet. At 7:47, the Fresher reported to the Skylark by the UQC underwater telephone that she was beginning the test depth dive. 5 minutes later, Harvey reported being at 400 feet and checking for leaks. At 7:54, the Fresher told the rescue ship that future references to depth would be made in terms of test depth. At 8:09, the Fresher reported that she was at 1/2 test depth. At 8:35, the Fresher communicated minus 300 feet. At 9:02, the Fresher asked for a repetition of a course reading. At 9:12, the two ships made a routine check. The Skylark's handwritten log, the official record, recorded at 9:12 a satisfactory underwater telephone check was made. Then the Fresh reported, had position up angle, attempting to blow up. The exact time of that final message is not recorded. Some of the Skylark's crew remember the message differently. Experiencing minor problem, have positive angle, attempting to blow. And experiencing minor difficulty, have positive up angle, attempting to blow. We'll keep you informed. At 9:14, the Skylark requested that the Fresher give her course and bearing. There was no reply. Then the Skylark asked, "Are you in control?" There was no reply. The question was asked again several times. Nothing more was heard from the submarine until 9:17, when there was a garbled message that ended with the distinct words, "test depth." Seconds later, the Skylark's commanding officer, Lieutenant Commander Stanley W. Hecker, heard what sounded like a ship breaking up, like a compartment collapsing. Subsequently, the Skylark began dropping grenades, the prearranged signal for submarine to surface in the event that UQC communications failed. The Skylark advised shore commands of the situation, and soon massive air and surface forces were searching for the missing undersea craft. The Fresher was gone, in water some 8,400 feet deep. At 1900 hours on April 10th, the Navy began notifying the families of the men on board that the Fresher, the submarine, was overdue and presumed missing. There was no use of the term sunk or lost, as optimists hoped that the submarine was intact and suffering a communications failure. That hope quickly faded. A massive search began for the remains of the Fresher. In time, some floating debris from the submarine was recovered. An automobile and then a discarded diesel-electric submarine, the Toro, were sunk in the area to determine how local currents would affect a sinking object. Soon, ships searched the ocean floor with sonar and deep-towed sleds with cameras, magnetometers, and Geiger counters. Some debris was detected, and small pieces were recovered. Next, the Bafsif Tracy 2 was brought to the area. She was the only U.S. craft that could reach the 8,400-foot depth the Fresher relied in. On June 27th, she located the main Fresher debris field. The Tristy 2 was able to recover a twisted pipe with the markings 593 boat. The Bafsif returned to dive on the debris field in 64, 67, 77, and 1979. And we have an image here of soldiers saluting with taps being played during a reef-laying ceremony at the USS Fresher Commemorative Monument in Arlington National Cemetery. I'm going to pop over quickly, see how our chat is doing tonight. Got a couple things happen over here. Yeah, Hot Wheels and Legos are good competitor. To each their own. And History of Waffles has joined in. Thank you for tuning in tonight to our live stream. Off to town, he says. He is running off to the town of Much Merry. Ken saying how he still has his something for 55 years now. Yes, historic trains. Took one across country from Philly to California back in 96. And Ken shouting sailors. Oh, book Buffer. I remember that trip being in that car bench with a window, plaid curtains, the nasty jelly beans that tasted like hot garbage. Oh, yeah, especially when they melt when they're in the sunlight. So for those that are tuning in live now, we're actually reading an article from Naval History from the U.S. Naval Institute about the sinking of the USS Fresher. Today is the anniversary of the ship's sinking. You waffles, and everybody's going to grill me. Of the boat sinking, because a boat is the technical term to describe a submarine in the U.S. Navy. You Navy guys and all your traditions. And I say that with my father and grandfather both being in the Navy. So, what killed the Fresher? On June 6, 1963, the Navy's Court of Inquiry into the loss of the Fresher completed its work at almost 2 months of hearings. The court recorded 1,700 pages of testimony from 120 witnesses and collected some 225 charts, drawings, letters, photographs, and other exhibits related to the disaster. The first 2 paragraphs of the court's subsequent public testament presented the official Navy opinion of what killed the Fresher. A flooding casualty in the engine room is believed to be the most probable cause of the sinking of the nuclear submarine Fresher, lost April 10, 1963, 220 miles east of Cape Cod, with 129 persons aboard. The Navy believes it's most likely that a piping system failure had occurred in one of the Fresher's saltwater systems, probably in the engine room. The enormous pressure of seawater surrounding the submarine subjected her interior to a violent spray of water and progressive flooding. In all probability, water affected critical electrical circuits and caused loss of power. Fresher slowed and began to sink. Within moments, she had exceeded her collapse depth and totally flooded. She came to rest on the ocean floor, 8,400 feet beneath the surface. But midway in the statement was a qualifier. The record states it is impossible, with the information now available, to obtain a more precise determination of what exactly happened. Still, an analysis of the last messages of the Fresher, coupled with the latter analysis of the acoustic recordings by the Navy's seafloor sound surveillance system, indicated a piping failure was not the cause. Rather, it appears that at 9:12 on April 10th, the Fresher was at 1,100 feet to 1,200 feet, approaching her test depth in what so far had been a normal, safe, and seemingly routine test dive. Then came the message, experiencing minor problem. What is a minor problem in a complex nuclear-powered submarine? At a depth of 1,000 feet, approximately 100,000 pounds of seawater would flood through a 6-inch pipe in just 1 minute. Even flooding through a half-inch pipe hardly would be considered as minor, as the noise and the powerful spray that would cause confusion within the submarine. Commander Axine, the Fresher's first commanding officer, believed that even a half-inch pipe failure at those depths would not be described as minor. The breaching of a pipe between 2 and 5 inches in diameter would have led to water rushing into the submarine at a velocity of 1,800 miles per hour at a depth of 1,300 feet. Had there been major flooding at test depth, it would have generated extreme noise levels that would have prevented effective UQC communications with the Skylark. No such interference was evident during those communications. Further, the noise generated by such flooding would have been detected by SOSUS. It was not detected. Experiencing minor problem indicates that no sudden catastrophic event befell the Fresher. For 4 minutes, as the Fresher was attempting to blow up by emptying her ballast tanks with compressed air, there was no communication. Then, at 9:17, the submarine transmitted a message ending with test depth. It generally was supposed that exceeding was one of the words preceding test depth. The U.S. Navy constructs submarines to withstand 1 1/2 times the pressure of their design test depth. That is a safety factor. The collapse depth is based on both mathematical calculations and model tests. It thus seemed reasonable to assume that the collapse of the depth of the Fresher was approximately 1,950 feet. The subsequence. And then a little bit here. The sequence of casualties suffered by the Fresher apparently caused a fateful depth increase of some 600 feet from test depth to collapse depth in 5 agonizing minutes. As she neared collapse depth, the fittings and pipes would have begun to give way, emitting powerful jets of water that pushed aside men as they struggled to plug them and shorted out electrical systems, making corrective action impossible. The additional weight of water thus emitted would have driven the Fresher still deeper at an ever-increasing speed. The submarine's hull would groan under the increasing pressure, trying to crush her airfield interior. There probably was no serious personal casualties up to that point, but all in the submarine would now have sensed that they were rushing toward disaster and groped frantically for some means of escape or survival. The insulating cork that lined the submarine's interior would begin to crack and possibly flake off. Pipes would pull apart as the water pressure began to pull the submarine's hardened steel like taffy. The hull would then implode. Complete destruction would occur 1/20th of a second, too fast to cognitively recognized by the men within the submarine. Millions of pounds of water under tremendous pressure would smash a submarine's hull, breaking it open, twisting portions, disintegrating others. The theory that water filled the plummeting Fresher before she could implode is generally discounted because the additional weight of water would have accelerated the downward rate and caused an implosion before the hull could fill with water. What was the minor difficulty that the Fresher encountered at 9:13 that led to the worst submarine disaster in history? Even though that problem was called minor, the Fresher command officer soon attempted to blow his main ballast tanks to reach the surface. Thus, it appears that the minor difficulty probably was one that caused the submarine to become heavy. That most likely would occur as a result of losing propulsion or taking on water. As noted, taking on water could have led to a loss of propulsion. Okay, we're pretty close to the end. I'm enjoying reading this, but I'm also getting winded if you can't tell. More probable as the loss of propulsion was the initial difficulty. With the resulting loss of forward motion, the Fresher began to sink deeper as a result of her heavy water ballast. An effort to expel ballast would have been difficult because of the increasing external water pressure. Before the downward motion of the submarine could be halted, she exceeded her collapse depth, with subsequent failures of pipings and fittings emitting water driving her still deeper until the hull imploded. Multiple lines of evidence confirmed that Fresher did not experience a major flooding before the collapse of her pressure hull at depth of 2,400 feet. Most significant, acoustic analysis recordings confirmed a loss of electrical power and the resulting reactor scram near test depth about 9 minutes before the collapse of the pressure hull. And Commander Axine had stated that the message attempting to blow indicated that propulsion was lost because the submarine should have come up faster by planing up than by blowing ballast. He also could envision that a reactor scram could be described as a minor problem, even at those depths. Thus died the USS Fresher. 6 months later, the Navy announced that all 31 nuclear-powered submarines that enter construction in the United States were being delayed. The Navy noted that deficiencies in equipment and workmanship are contributing factors to delays. Follow-on Fresher-class submarines were being lengthened to provide more buoyancy, with a subsafe program providing additional safety features. Every Operation Nuclear Submarine was restricted to 50% of test depth until subsafe modifications were made. Also, the restarting procedures following a reactor scram were being revised to reduce the startup time. After the Fresher disaster revealed the Navy's limitations for deep ocean search and rescue, in 1964, the Navy would establish the Deep Submersion Systems Project to develop and manage advanced ocean systems. That effort included plans to construct 6 rescue submersibles that could operate to submarine collapse depths and 2 deep ocean search vehicles that could operate to 20,000 feet, 90% of the ocean's depths. The DSSP portfolio eventually included deep-sea salvage capabilities, seafloor habitation down to 600 feet, the location recovery of small objects from the ocean floor, and the nuclear-powered submersible NR-1. Still, when the nuclear-powered submarine Scorpion was lost in 1968 with all 99 men on board, there were no possibility of rescue or salvage. Subsequently, the Soviet Union and Russia suffered the loss of 5 nuclear submarines, and some crewmen were saved from 4 of them as they reached the surface before sinking. But the USS Fresher was the first nuclear submarine to be lost, and the worst disaster in terms of people lost. So this is an article published by Norman Polmar. You can find it as a part of Naval History magazine, which is published by the U.S. Naval Institute. I'm going to drop a link. What do you guys think? No, I know that article went very technical heavy on the Fresher. I've only known the rough details on it. I knew that there was something up with the water system, something up with pipes possibly freezing at depth, too rapid of depths. I've heard stuff like that, So I knew, obviously, it lost with all hands on board, and I knew it was the first one. So I got to learn a bit more about the Fresher, the first nuclear submarine that the U.S. Navy, and I think in the world in general, lost. Well, I wear a hat for the newest commissioned warship, the newest nuclear submarine in the U.S. Navy, the USS Massachusetts, commissioned at the end of March of this year. How did Redoubt get a hat for the commissioning of the newest warship? I wonder, could this indicate a new episode of Retracing History in the future? Only time will tell. One more order of business, and then we will be done for tonight. How's everybody doing? How's everybody holding up? We're approaching the 2-hour mark. How's everybody doing? All righty. I actually got to add this image. I forgot to do it. So, between 1840 and about 1880, that was the time period we covered today for the presidential throwdown. We had a lot of deaths in the presidency, and that required a lot of vice presidents to assume the role of the presidency. And I've decided for the presidential throwdown, the rule will be that a president has to complete a full term in office in order to have a 1v1 matchup. Lincoln got to have a 1v1 matchup with Buchanan because he did complete his first full term. However, these guys did not get to complete the full term. So what we're going to do, because I don't think I can, let me see, how many can I do? No, I can't. I can't put 4 in. So here is what we're going to do. Please type in the chat, out of these 5 and the unfortunates of the presidency, who you feel should be the wild card to get to advance to the second round. We got William Henry Harrison, 9th president of the United States, the shortest term president because he died within 3 weeks of being in office, died of illness, which led to John Tyler, his vice president, assuming the position. Tyler was known, he was insulted by the press as being his accidency because he was the first man to become president that was not president. He's the first vice president to ascend the presidency, first succession. So do you feel Tyler deserves it? He gets a pretty bad rap from Whigs, from Democrats, from just about everybody, because he tended to keep to Democratic policies, but he had been elected into the position because he was a Whig. It made nobody happy. He even kind of got ostracized by part of his own he got ostracized by Southern Democrats because they're like, hey, you sided with the Whigs. Why don't come back over here? Then we have Zachary Taylor, who was a general in the Mexican-American War, one of the leading generals the U.S. Army had. He used that populism to ascend to position. He's the second Whig president, believe it or not. Harrison was the first. Taylor was the second. Both Whig presidents have something in common. They die in office due to illness. Great job. He had a little more to do about it, Harrison. Taylor did have an impact on American policymaking. His big thing was advocating for the admission of California as a free state, which would have dire consequences when it comes to the Great Compromise of 1850, admitting more free and slave states, what they're going to do about the Mexican cession states, and what they're going to do eventually about Kansas and Nebraska. So Taylor did have an impact on that ball rolling, getting bigger and bigger toward the American Civil War. He would be, after his death, President Millard Fillmore would assume the role as president for the rest of would have been Taylor's term. He would see the Compromise of 1850 come to pass. He also is going to set into motion the Perry expedition. I know I gave Pierce a lot of credit for that. Fillmore was really the one advocating for that. So He had a hand in that and increase in foreign policy. But again, Phil Morris tends to seem as a pretty weak president because he was vice president, had to assume a term of office. He was only there for about 3 years, and he didn't see, and he would not be reelected. Then we go fast forward to after the assassination of President Lincoln, Andrew Johnson, restraint of federal authority and Reconstruction, which is the kindest thing I can say about Andrew Johnson. He wanted to go back to state rights. He tried to be very careful of how he was going to use federal authority in the aftermath of the American Civil War. Unfortunately, that allowed for a lot of issues that would develop during the Grant administration. A lot of that would begin festering during the Johnson administration. And of course, he is the first president to have impeachment charges brought against him. So I don't know. I'll just let that speak for itself. So be sure if you're tuning in right now, post in the chat we have for Taylor. We have one for Taylor. He's going to make the wild card thus far. Work is nuts here for no reason whatsoever. Because everybody's cards just broke down, apparently. 11th hour, everybody. It's always like that when I work. Always at the 11th hour. Boats are not subs. We have ships. Don't touch my boats. Well, I thought technically they were referred to, submarines were referred to as boats. And then I thought when we're debating between, I agree with you, they're bigger than a little boat. But see, this is why there's certain things I don't want to touch. And it's like, oh no, we're getting sensitive. Navy, we're getting into Navy lore. It can get very touchy very quickly. And let's be honest, Readout Productions is not good with specifics. Readout Productions will make words up and then never use those words again. I am not the best man for the job for educating about history, but I have fun doing it nevertheless. And I hope you guys have fun listening to me ramble about these sometimes famous, but I especially like looking at the little known stuff in history. I've had a lot of fun doing the presidential throwdown. I got to read about presidents I don't normally think about. So that's all part of the experience here at Readout Productions. It is a learning experience for myself. Just call them U-boats. I don't think Waffles will appreciate that. I don't think he'll appreciate that. But yeah, I get what you mean by calling him a U-boat. I know the technical term for a U-boat. Yep, underwater boat. I get it. People popping up for stupid stuff. We got two for Taylor. I think Taylor's like the most, I was kind of suspecting it was going to be Taylor, but I was curious to see. Already, if you're tuning in, we got 2 more minutes. 2 more minutes to vote out of the wild card round. Who you want to advance? We got Harrison, we got Tyler, we got Taylor, we got Fillmore, and we got Johnson. Who from the wild card is going to get a second chance, going to go to the second round? They're all duking it out here. This is like a ladder match at Money in the Bank here, WWE style. We're throwing them all in there, and we're letting one will walk out alive. Airedales. What about Airedales? What's Airedales? I'm very confused. What's going on tonight? And as we sit and we're winding down tonight's conversations, if you've tuned in live, be sure to hit the like button to let the TubeU algorithm know you do want to be edumericated with content like we produce here for Readout Productions. But hitting the like button also helps all historical channels, because when we tell the TubeU algorithm we want to use social media to enrich our brains and not rot them, that one like lets the algorithm know to promote all kinds of historical based content. So it may be me that pops up in your algorithm. It may be History of Waffles then that'll pop up more frequently. Maybe Books and Battlefields. You never know. So one like on one channel is going to help everybody out. If you want to follow us on our future ventures, be sure to be subscribed here to the channel. You'll be the first notified when we go live and do live streams like this, as well as when we post a new video. Like tomorrow, we do have a new video coming out. New episode of Retracing History. It is going to be about Elizabeth Thorne, who was the wife of the caretaker at Evergreen Cemetery at Gettysburg. Her husband went off to fight in a Pennsylvania regiment. He was not around when the Battle of Gettysburg actually occurred around Evergreen Cemetery. And after the battle was over, people were trying to figure out what they were going to do with the massive loss of life that plagued the streets of Gettysburg. Well, one of the first decisions was to start burying them in the town cemetery. That's something you wouldn't actually want to do, put the dead where we're already burying the dead. Unfortunately, it meant that Elizabeth Ford, who was 6 months pregnant at the time, was forced in a situation where she had to dig about 100 graves for soldiers killed in battle with assistance from her father. So we're going to talk about Elizabeth Ford's story and how she survived the Battle of Gettysburg and the aftermath. That'll be coming out tomorrow. But if you're a member of the Garrison, which is our membership program available through, I keep saying it's Ko-fi, but I was actually told today it may actually be pronounced coffee and just spelled Cofi. So our Ko-fi account, I'm going to keep saying Ko-fi because coffee makes me think I want to drink coffee. We're at 9:00 at night tonight. I do not need any more caffeine until tomorrow. If you want to become a member and you want to watch that new episode of Retracing History right now, you can join the Garrison. Link is in the description below. All right, we're about to wrap up. Here we go. 3, 2, 1. He's spamming. Yeah, he's spamming. Everybody's spamming. Jamestown. Oh, everybody's going crazy. Yep, everybody's going crazy. Your video. Yep. So 3, 2, 1. I have announced that in the wild card round, Zachary Taylor, by popular vote in the chat of 2 votes, will be advancing out of this wild card of unfortunate presidents. He will be going to the second round. Congratulations, Zachary Taylor. You've made the second round. But that concludes tonight's stream. I hope everybody's enjoyed, had fun tonight. I don't do these regularly anymore, and I know it's kind of like, I really wish I could have a schedule to do live streams, but I'm gonna be honest, guys, I have them the only time I have to do them is in the evenings, and some evenings I come home and I'm just mush brained from a day at work or traveling, and I'm just like, I can't put on a competent show. I'm gonna put on a crappy show, which maybe that's what you guys want, is a really crappy show, because I'm just gonna say a lot of random stuff. Maybe that is what you guys want, but I want at least to be somewhat presentable, be somewhat coherent. Ooh, Mr. Brew Littles. Ooh, I will look that up. That sounds pretty good. I do like me a good brewery. Yeah, it truly was pure democracy. So yeah, I'm trying to keep a semi-regular schedule, but it's just rough on the live streams. I have fun doing them though whenever I do them. So hopefully the next live stream will be April 23rd, which will be a Thursday. I can't do one next week. I have stuff going on that Thursday night. So hopefully the stars will align and we'll get to do one on April 23rd. But until next time.
Farewell and adieu to you fair Spanish ladies. Farewell.